So my friends, that is what we call the G-turn. And it's basically a tank turn, and that is one of the many things that you'll be able to do with this, which is the new electric G-Wagon. We've talked about it a little bit in the past on the channel as well, but now they're really kind of zeroing in on what this car is going to be. It's been worked on for a long time, and for me personally, I think it's probably the most exciting electric car that's coming for me, because it marries, you know, the normal look of a car design icon with all the stuff that we do actually like about EVs as well. So in that way, it's really important, because I think it could show the world and other manufacturers and customers that you don't have to go totally zany to have a cool electric car. You can have one that is much more traditional looking. So I'm going to fill you in on some of the basics of what makes this car what it is, and I'll show you the G-turn a couple of more times as well. So let's check out this together. It's the new electric G-Wagon. So guys, what makes a G-Wagon a G-Wagon? I think there's a number of things to that identity question. One of it is undoubtedly the idea of the iconic design. If you squint your eyes or you tell a kid to draw a G, then you should get that kind of basic shape that we all know and love. And when you're going electric, with other cars at least at Mercedes, we've had all kinds of different shapes coming and going, right? Most of them I've not been a fan of at all. In fact, to be honest, I hated all of them, if we're totally honest. This, however, this is right up my street, because A, it's the most iconic off-roader in the world, arguably, or perhaps we shouldn't argue about that. But B, it should herald all of those bits that we love about EVs inside a car that's fairly normal looking. So I think design is a really important first bit, and it is a squint test, unfortunately, on this, because, you know, it's a camoed car, so we can't see much. But the typical G traits are there. The body is, it's identical, right? If we put a G63 there, you can't really tell the difference between the two of them, which is exactly what you want with your typical round headlights, etc. So the shape is the shape, and that's great. That's something to celebrate, because they could have very easily gone down the route of calling a different shaped car a G-Wagon and trying to get away with it, which wasn't going to fly with any of us. So design, brilliant. That's in there. Chunk of the doors, all that element that you really love about the G-Wagon will hopefully remain within this car. The other side of it is, of course, performance and off-roading ability, and I'm going to keep the two of them separate on this. Performance and off-roading ability is really important for a G-Wagon, and with the performance of this car, undoubtedly thanks to the fact that we're moving to electric motors, it's going to be just like you find your EVs, right? So you're going to have instant torque, loads of power, really good grip, torque vectoring, etc., etc. So as a road car, it's going to be quiet, it's going to be fast, it's going to be agile. All of that is undoubted. But how did they tackle the idea of off-roading? This is really fascinating to me. To answer that question, let's first understand what hides underneath the skin of here. Because of course, gone is your combustion engine, gone is your gearbox as well, and your typical 4MATIC system has disappeared as well. What remains is essentially the same type of suspension system that we've had in our classic G63, for example, just as if we take that as our basis. But then comes in the electric elements, and what we have in here is an EDU, or an electric drive unit, per wheel. Okay, so you've got two on the front and two on the rear, and they're linked in the middle. Then you've got your drive shafts on the side, and each of those drive units have their own two-speed gearboxes, okay? So you've got your low range and your high range as well. Essentially the same size. They're fixed in different ways to the front and the rear, but that is your basis. So you've basically got an electric motor per wheel, as you may have seen in other manufacturers as well. The very basic nature of how it's able to do that G-turn then is thanks to the fact that we have the four motors. And I was talking to the engineers here, and that whole tank turn concept was one of the first things that came out of anyone's mouth as soon as, you know, the four motors was decided. And I'm so glad that they've done it. It'll probably be the first on an actual production car as well, which is cool. So having the four motors allows you to do cool and fun things like that. But equally, it also gives you the freedom of controlling the power per wheel. Now, if we think about that dynamically for a second, in terms of driving faster, you could have 100% of the power going to the rear, 100% of the power going to one wheel, as we've seen in the A45 in the drift mode. And it just allows this car to then give you the grip and the power on the fly if the system inside is clever enough, which undoubtedly it will be. My nickname for this car was the Clever Boy, that everybody quite liked, because it was so amazing in doing the off-roading stuff. It almost did it on autopilot with a creep mode and other such features, which you will see in the future. So we understand that we've got our 4 motors. We also have our traditional ladder frame as well. So that is maintained within here. There's undoubtedly going to have been some reinforcement going on there, because it does house right in the middle of it, in that spot that is so apt, the battery for this car. We don't have any information on batteries at this point. I read some news articles that said that it might pinch ideas from the EQXX in terms of the battery technology, silicon nodes instead of graphite ones, etc., to give it more range, but we just don't know because it's still prototype and they're not divulging that information. So you've got your battery, you've got your 4 motors. What does that add to the already weighty G-Wagon? We're talking something above 3 tons, okay? Which is a heavy old boy, right? But as we know in today's day and age, weight is just not as important as it used to be. It's kind of how you manage that weight. You know, with the BMW M2 being, you know, over 1700 kg, new C63 at 2,100 kilos as well. The weight figure is just a figure, and you have to really understand how the car handles itself. We were taken around this thing like a rally stage here, and I tell you what, it was like a little rally car. I felt like I was in a little A45 going around here, like a tuned up one. Incredibly agile, couldn't really feel the weight. The suspension was unbelievably comfortable versus the G2 that we took on the same place, and felt a lot bumpier. So, like I said, it's a clever boy. You know, it's interesting. It's got a lot against it in terms of what the technology is, but then a lot for it because of that technology as well. Now, some of the other inherent issues that you have when you make an EV out of something like this is that you need to protect the battery area, the underside of the car. So they have put a massive amount of protection at the bottom. We tested it as well. Things were hitting it, you know, we're going over rocks, scraping it as well. So all of that is within there. Obviously the water safety as well, that's all been built in. So in terms of things like, you know, wading depth, the angle that you can enter when off-roading, all of that is incredibly similar to your standard G-Class as well, which, you know, again, it's so impressive that they managed to do that. And things like, you know, getting the right height clearance and the ground height from the, you know, considering the fact that we have the motor in the middle, and, you know, it's all a little bit more complicated near your wheels, you still actually get the same type of flex and angle that you have in the standard G-Wagon. It was really interesting to see it get so exaggerated when doing this type of stuff. So yeah, it's going to be, they're basically aiming for the world's best electric off-roader. That's just like they say that they have the world's best combustion off-roader. They want the same with electric. From what I've seen, I mean, it handles as well, if not easier, than the normal G on off-roading, which it's an interesting feat. I really want to see what it's like on the road. Be interesting to see, you know, what do Mercedes decide to do eventually with styling, inside, outside. Electric sound is a topic as well. Be nice if this had, you know, a unique sound profile to it. But yeah, the future's very, for me, I'd love to have one of these as an electric car owner, as a Mercedes fan. It'll just hit all the right spots, I think. Now, the other thing that the 4 motors is able to do is mimic the differential locks that you have in your combustion G-Wagon, because that's so important, right? And obviously it does that with control of the torque per wheel. Because you have those electric motors, it's able to then, instead of you having to decouple front axle, use your central differential, use your rear differential, this just puts the power where it needs to go, and the amount of power, because obviously you have to regulate it given the fact that this is an EV. So very clever. The fact that it's an EV actually makes things perhaps a little bit simpler in that regard, but it's mimicking what a normal G-Wagon would do as well. So let's have a quick look around this. It looks pretty much like a G. I can't get too close because manufacturers are just really wary about camo cars, but I can see a little few changes here that I'll relay to you guys. Basic shape is exact G-Wagon, isn't it? So adding those electric motors on the front and the rear really haven't done
much to change. Anything externally, which is great, obviously the battery sitting in the ladder chassis, etc. Still got your typical wheel cover on the back, the rear looking exactly the same with your tow bar as well at the bottom. The lights look the same. Yeah, pleasantly, there's nothing really different about it. Side as well, exactly as you would expect. I have noticed some slightly different door handles, which are probably like facelift stuff, not EQG specific. I reckon they'll all, match each other pretty well. And on the front, I can see some little squares hiding behind the grills, like a different type of EQ design. But apart from that, it is a proper G-Wagon.
So guys, that's your electric G-Wagon or the EQG. And to finish things off, I think I owe you guys one more G-turn. See you next time.